'cause I see the born of no return. Sister, hey now, can't you see we're rushing for the end? I see the point of no return. Now see the point of no return. It's just...
Well, good evening, everybody. It's Tuesday again, and it's a new year. Welcome to 2015. I tell you, if you liked 2014, you're going to love 2015. My name is Gary Hendershot. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Wide Awake News on the Rents Radio Network. I hope you're in good spirits and ready to discuss all the foibles of the day. You know, I do sometimes get criticized, and you know, it's probably a fair criticism, you know, because I do tend to focus on news events that are newsworthy to those of us here in the United States. I am U.S. based. I'm located just a little south of Ground Zero, just south of Washington, D.C., and, you know, it's hard not to be overwhelmed by the volume of news that comes out of Washington. But, you know, there are other nations in the world, and there are listeners of this broadcast in other parts of the world. And one of the hot topics this week spans the Atlantic. Yeah. Now, for my American audience, the fellow I've got pictured over my shoulder on the video feed is Prince Andrew of Great Britain. He's the brother of Prince Charles, the heir apparent to the British throne. And apparently, he's been caught up in something of a scandal. Here's Prince Andrew being pictured with a fellow named Jeffrey Epstein, or Epstein. Epstein. Yes, apparently Mr. Epstein owned a little private island off the coast of Florida, where he entertained the rich and famous and movers and shakers of the world. Apparently, Mr. Epstein had 21 different phone numbers for contacting Bill Clinton, our former president. And his list of contacts had many notable names. I understand Woody Allen is suing for somebody hinting that he might have been in Jeffrey Epstein's contact list. But, you know, Hollywood notables, political notables, you know, runs the gamut. Apparently, Mr. Epstein, or Epstein, however he says his name, was into some kinky stuff with young women. Now, there's a part of me that breathes a heavy sigh of relief in that there were not goats and sheep and young boys involved. I mean, at least this was apparently male-female oriented. But they had what it was described as a dungeon where various adult activities were engaged in. And Mr. Epstein apparently was kinky enough that he liked to take pictures. So now, look, you know, I'm not one to judge people's adult activities, and What two consenting adults do behind closed doors is frankly none of my business. I don't want to know. I'm not so kinky that I want to watch. But when royals are involved in such kinkiness, it's news. Now, many years ago, probably long before many in my audience were born, there was an instance where Prince Philip, the husband or consort of the current Queen of England, was caught up in a bit of a dalliance, and it hit the morning newspapers, and by the afternoon it was squelched. It was gone. There was no more mention of it. That is the power that the British royals wield on the press in England. This time around, when Prince Andrew's turn to be shown in the spotlight, it appears that they're having some difficulty putting the kibosh on it. As a matter of fact, there's articles in the Daily Mail as of yesterday still discussing this thing, something about toe sucking. Like I say, what they do behind closed doors is, between them and their conscience. The real issue at hand here is accusations that very young women, some of whom are pictured over my shoulder for those who are watching the video feed on this, very young women, apparently some who may be under the legal age of consent here in the United States, were involved and were described as being sex slaves. Now, it's one thing to bring in some ladies of the evening from Las Vegas who are professionals and in the business, bring them in to entertain. It's another to procure young women who may or may not really know what they're getting into and may not be of legal age of consent. Now, that's where you got to draw the line. Now, this fellow Epstein apparently wound up spending a little time in jail over this. He's now out of jail, from what I understand. But the stories are now coming out, and one of the young women, Virginia, is apparently going to, Virginia Roberts is her name, is apparently going to publish a tell-all book on the affair. Virginia Roberts was told she would be looked after if she kept quiet, court documents allege. Claims she was contacted by lawyers acting for pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. She says that this was just a week after she was interviewed by the FBI about allegations of sex abuse at his Florida mansion. So, the rich and famous are in the news. Typically, the rich and famous like being in the news. Not so sure this is the kind of coverage they had in mind. Now that brief little dissertation was for all my friends, all my listeners in the UK who constantly tell me that I never address any of the hot news topics pertinent to them. How about Sonygate? We thought this was all over with. I mean, security experts from all over looking at this saying, there's no way. There's no way Korea did this. Come on. This was a disgruntled ex-employee. This was some kind of insider deal. This was maybe some kind of a scam that Sony was running to try and promote this movie that they were coming out with, which I understand has been a real stinker and kind of a bomb at the box office. But no, it's still in the news. Let's see. This one's from techdirt.com. The headline is, "In another meaningless gesture, the U.S. administration smacks North Korea with sanctions over the Sony hack." Now, for those of you who've been under a rock for the last few weeks, it appears that somehow somebody made off with about 100 terabytes of data from Sony. Okay, well, it can happen. It's not easy. We're talking a suitcase full of hard drives and, the technical implications of getting that much data in a reasonable period of time are fairly significant. It's not the type of thing that one would assume could be handled easily via an internet connection, okay? The key to it is our government would like you to believe that Sony was hacked from the outside via the internet. That is key to their argument because they wish to use this incident as an excuse to clamp down on the internet. Now, many of you may be aware that the U.S. government has been trying for years. They had SOPA and a couple others, all aimed at protecting the children from pornography on the internet or protecting your online banking information from those evil Chinese hackers. And, all the excuses in the world always aimed at, we're going to protect you from evil. Just, give us a little bit more of your liberty, a little bit more of your freedom to choose, and we will protect you from all those evil people out there in the world. Now, those of us who've been keeping up on this issue know full well that we've got a whole bag of three-letter boys running around the United States who supposedly are snooping on every keystroke you type on the internet, and they don't seem to be able to stop Chinese hackers from getting into the electric grid. They don't seem to be able to stop this theft of data from Sony. They don't seem to be able to stop anything. But now they wish to put yet another pile of doo-doo on top of all this nonsense to protect you even more than what they're doing today. That is their argument. They wish to imply that North Korea, using their 2 tin cups and a string internet connection, and all 3 of the computers that exist in North Korea, managed to get 100 terabytes of data from Sony via the internet. And unless you sign off on more internet security, they'll get your bank account information next. That is what they're trying to propose. And of course, to put weight on it, they've piled yet more sanctions on North Korea. According to the Hill.com, the Sony hack could be a game changer. The high-profile hack at Sony has injected new urgency into the years-old push for cybersecurity. That's going to be their buzzword. We need a Homeland Security for cybersecurity. It's basically fair game. After the cyber attack on Sony, a lobbyist which represents tech giants like Microsoft, the recent cyber assault caused Sony to briefly pause the release of a multi-million-dollar movie, which nobody's going to see. That is kind of funny. I argued last week that all this nonsense, it was just a big public relations stunt, big PR stunt to promote this movie, wherein the head poobah North Korea gets assassinated, and it's funny, haha. It's done in a tongue-in-cheek way. It stars apparently some guys who usually do these stoner movies with the goofballs in college who, can't seem to get their face out of a bong. Those are the two stars of the movie. And, it's intended, I think, to be a comical presentation, although it fails in all respects. Needless to say, it's a stinker of a movie, but, when you got a stinker that you spent, millions and millions of dollars on, you want to get people to watch it, nothing helps like a good PR stunt. And that, I think, is probably what Sony was doing with this cyber hack nonsense. Our government, looking for any opportunity, don't let a good crisis go to waste, is jumping on this and using it as yet another argument to impose additional cybersecurity on you. It won't be aimed at North Korean cyber hackers or, they won't do a thing about all the Viagra ads that you get in your email. They won't do a thing about, all the fake Rolex watch ads that you get. They're not going to do a thing about the spam and the purveyors of viruses, the real internet criminals. They're not going to do a thing about that. What they're going to do is they're going to pass legislation that makes it easier, more convenient, and retroactively legal for them to spy on you. That's really what they're after. Now, in a related story, this is, I think, somewhat comical. Cinematic warfare heats up. This is from RINF.com. From Pyongyang comes the announcement that DPRK Pictures is soon scheduled to release its new film. Yes, you didn't know that North Korea produced movies, did you? The new film is titled The Teleprompter. It's a slapstick comedy, somewhat raunchy by Asian standards, of the assassination of U.S. President Barack Obama. So it looks like, North Korea, with tongue-in-cheek, is going to do a tit-for-tat. You did a movie about assassinating our guy? Okay, we'll do a funny movie about, somebody assassinating yours. Now, in some respects, you have to admire the maturity that North Korea is showing off over this. They're shaking their heads saying, hey, look, this is ridiculous. You're blaming us for this nonsense. You're just looking for a scapegoat, and we were handy. But, you want to play tit for tat? Okay. We're going to release a comical movie that's a little bit raunchy about, somebody assassinating your guy. See how you like it. Nah. Your mother wears combat boots. Oh, boy. And, and life goes on. Now, one of the things that's been proposed is that, the internet, like your telephone, should be put under the Federal Communications Commission as a public utility. Okay? And, at first glance, it almost sounds reasonable. When you're hearing the arguments in favor of it, it almost sounds reasonable. The problem is the way the FCC tends to find mission creep in everything they do. You remember the George Carlin bit about the dirty words you were not allowed to say on TV? Well, suppose standards like that were applied to the internet. Now, I'm not a big one for, dropping a whole lot of F-bombs and flowery language, but part of the flavor of the internet is the freedom to express yourselves in ways that, you might not be able to do on the public airwaves. For some people, a whole lot of F-bombs and nonsense, that is their normal manner of speaking. I hear on the weekends, an internet radio program done by some fellows out of Ireland that my wife and I joke back and forth. We call them the effing guys, because every other word, but it's an entertaining show. And, if you're not overly sensitive to some of the rather crude language, which from my point of view just shows a lack of intellect, but that's okay. Sometimes the shows are relatively entertaining. we could lose that. We could lose that freedom, that freedom to speak naturally, that freedom to speak to your peers. I've noticed that with the younger generations, you get down to the 30s and youngers, they tend to speak in ways that fellows my age consider a little bit crude, but that is their natural way of speaking. So what are you going to do? You cannot legislate somebody's speech patterns. But if the FCC gets control of it, there's a very strong possibility that they will legislate speech patterns. And you can also bet that they will be taxing the living daylights out of your internet service, much the same way they tax you on your telephony and other public utilities. Now, I am hearing the music in the background, so it's time for me. Look, how about that? I timed that one pretty well. I am going to have to slip out of here while the studio sells some product. We'll be back with some more barking at the moon right after these important commercial announcements. Alrighty, and we're back from that blatantly commercial interruption of the evening's festivities, and you are listening to Gary Hendershot doing the Tuesday edition of Wide Awake News on the Rents Radio Network, and I am happy to see so many have decided to spend their Tuesday evening listening to me rant and rave about stuff I have absolutely no control about. Oh boy, on to one of my favorite topics. I look at the news every week to see what hot new items might have come up in the wild and woolly world of Obamacare. Oh, and regular listeners know that I just love Obamacare. I sleep so good at night knowing I got that free health care. Yeah. Well, this news came out of activistpost.com. Now, Activist Post, I like them as a source. They quite often come up with some pretty intriguing articles, but you do have to double check the veracity of some of the reporting that comes out of Activist Post. But needless to say, they are reporting. The headline is, "Did you receive an Obamacare subsidy?" I think last week I reported that almost 90%, I think, it's mid-80 percentile of those who are signed up for Obamacare are receiving some sort of federal subsidy that got the premium down to something approaching reasonableness. Well, here's your surprise. You got one of them Obamacare subsidies? Well, you may owe money to the IRS. Yeah, here's how the article goes. Remember those Obamacare subsidies, the ones that were supposed to make health care affordable? That was the name of the thing, affordable health care. Remember that? Remember that? Yeah. A nasty surprise is in store for about half of those, an estimated 3.4 million Americans, when they file their taxes. That's because, oops, they received subsidies that were a little too generous. Back in the old days, we used to talk about something called a bait and switch, where they'd dangle something really tasty in front of you at a very reasonable price. And yeah, that sounds good. And you'd lay your money on the table and you think you got your goodie, and you open it up and you look at it, and it's nothing like what you were shown. I used to remember, the Big Mac commercial where that bad boy sat about a foot high, man. You thought, man, when I get my Big Mac, I'm going to need help holding the thing up, Look at the picture of the thing. It was huge, And you get the thing, and it looked like it shriveled up cousin, We used to refer to that as a bait and switch. Now, isn't that kind of what they've done here with Obamacare? They teased people about, oh, yeah, you sign up, you get this here government subsidy, and it gets the price down to something you can afford. So you just go ahead and sign right here, Mr. American. Just sign right up for your free health care. And now we come to find out that, wham, you're going to get hit in the side of the head with a 2x4 come tax time because the subsidy you were given was just a little too generous. Don't you just love Obamacare? You know, something else in the news. This is kind of funny and related to Obamacare. You know, the Obamacare legislation was written by, you know, a bunch of, you know, big thinkers. You know, there were a number of parameters. They had to hide the implications that it was a tax from the Congress, because, you know, the Congress couldn't go in front of their constituents and say, oh yeah, we're going to lay a big fat tax on you. But the only power that the Congress has is a tax, so they had to make it technically a tax that congressmen could say is not a tax to get it handled and get it through the Supreme Court. So they went to some of the biggest thinkers at you know, MIT and Harvard University. Well, the folks at Harvard University right now who helped write this legislation are apparently absolutely livid after learning that they are not exempt from Obamacare. They're actually going to have to sign up for that bad boy. They thought they had very carefully structured this thing so that they, like your congressman, like most big shots, were exempt from the legislation. See, we got this two-tier legal system now here where we got the rules for you peasants, and then we got the rules for us big shots, see? And the folks at Harvard who helped write this legislation thought it was very carefully crafted so that they were part of the club that didn't have to do Obamacare. Now they come to find out that they will indeed have to sign up for Obamacare, and they're livid over it. That article from Zero Hedge. And I tell you, I highly recommend, there will be a link to this article in the About This Video thing on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and find, you know, user Smart Scarecrow on YouTube, or if you go to my website, smartscarecrow.com, and look for the blog entry for January 6th, 2015, there will be a link to this Zero Hedge article. And if you need a laugh some evening, if you're feeling kind of down, feeling kind of depressed, and you really want to giggle, you got to read this article. This guy, this guy Durden over at Zero Hedge, he puts a really interesting spin on it. And I think if you read the article, you too will get a giggle. And I think you deserve one. Let's see, I got a couple minutes here before the next break. Let's see if I can get through the European news here. Economic sanctions against Russia must be stopped. Yeah, I'm going to try to say this guy's name. I think it's Holland. He's the big shot in France. He's arguing that, you know, these sanctions that have been imposed on Russia since the debacle in Ukraine, which is still a standoff, and to be honest with you, that could still go hot. The Western-backed faction in Ukraine is doing a significant military buildup while peace talks are supposedly going on. It appears they're using the peace talks as something of a cover to build up their military forces along the demilitarized zone, if you will, between them and the eastern faction in Ukraine. So, you know, we still really don't know if there's going to be a peaceful resolution to the issue of Ukraine. The sanctions imposed on Russia were intended to punish them for not just, you know, cowering off in the corner somewhere as NATO and its allies absorbed a chunk of turf that has historically been aligned with Russia. Russia drew a line in the sand and said no more. And so far it's been kind of a stalemate. The U.S.-backed factions did not get everything they thought they had paid for, and they're still pressing. But France, Germany, Austria, other European nations are looking at this thing saying, hey, wait a minute, you're killing our economy. We do a lot of business with Russia. You're hurting us more than you're hurting them. It's time to knock it off. And in another interesting move, Putin, the guy who plays chess to our Parcheesi, has made an interesting offer. He's basically telling Europe, hey, dump the U.S., dump this European Union nonsense. Come on, join us and the Eurasian Trade Alliance. We've already got China signed on. We got a number of former Soviet bloc nations signed on. This is the way you ought to go. And you know what? Looking at the offer, there's probably some in Europe that are scratching their heads saying, why not? And once again, I am hearing the music. Boy, I managed to time them right tonight, I'll tell you, But I will have to step out for just a few minutes while the studio runs some commercials. Be back with some more Barking at the Moon in just a moment or two. Alrighty, and that's it for the break. So I'm on the home stretch now. I've got about 12 minutes to finish up these last few little ditties, and can't help but get involved in a little economic news. From the time the United States was founded, back in 1776 or 1781, wherever you decide you want to put the point of demarcation, all the way through King Bush II. It's Bush the Lesser. Throughout that entire 200 and some odd years of history, the United States managed to amass a debt, the national debt, of just under $6.5 trillion. Yeah, that's with a T, man. That's a lot of zeros. That's more zeros than I got fingers, so it's pretty hard for me to count that many zeros. $6.5 trillion by the time Bush the Lesser was escorted out of the White House. In the 6 years that Barack Obama has been president, the national debt has doubled, more than doubled. Under Barack Obama's tutelage, the Federal Reserve has learned how to print an additional $7.5 trillion. Yes. So 250 years it took them to get it up to the embarrassing amount of $6.5 trillion, an amount that you, your children, your grandchildren, and your great-great-great-great-grandchildren could not possibly afford to pay back. But under this one president, Barack Hussein Obama, we've managed to add an additional $7.5 trillion to the national debt. Now, is that the change that you voted for? Yeah. That debt amounts to $65,443 for every household in the United States. Now, not every household pays taxes. For the tax-paying households in the United States, each of you can expect a bill of $84,226 to cover the debt amassed during the Obama administration. Yeah, I don't know about you, but that sends my BS meter right off the scale. But, you know, that's the facts, Jack. According to ABC News, it appears that House Speaker Boehner was narrowly reelected. Narrowly reelected. I don't know. He got, 216 votes. Only 24 Republicans voted for somebody else. It doesn't sound terribly narrow to me, but he needed at least 205. Now, they usually vote party lines for the Speaker of the House, and they figured with the Republicans pretty much owning the House of Representatives, whoever the Republican big shots decided was going to be Speaker of the House would automatically get it. And Boehner was pretty much assured of re-election. But there were 24 Republican congressmen who broke with the pack. Basically, these are folks who might be identified with a Tea Party label or a really, really, really conservative Republican type label. These are fellers who looked at Boehner and said, this guy's a suck-up to the president. He's letting the president walk all over the Congress. We need somebody who's a little stronger in there. And the fact is, Boehner apparently does have significant ties to corporate interests that would really, really, really like open borders and lots of cheap labor flooding the market. He also has significant investments in firms that probably would benefit from Obamacare. So, the Speaker of the House, Mr. Boehner, does appear to have some significant conflicts of interest when it comes to representing conservative points of view and moving to push President Obama to get a little bit closer to reality on some of his socialist endeavors. But, Boehner's back in. And the 24 Republicans who did not support Mr. Boehner can expect various forms of punishment to begin now. Yeah, your gold card at the Playboy Club has been revoked, and you probably will not get an invitation to the private island of Mr. Epstein. So, yeah, and the House kicks off the new Congress with a jobs bill. Yeah, boy, how many times have we heard that? Yeah, a jobs bill. Yeah. House Republicans have pledged to continue making the American people's priorities, jobs and the economy, our priority. Bottom line is what they want to do is they want to force this Keystone pipeline through. Okay, now, there's a lot of things that the Republicans could do. I mean, they've pretty much got the people's mandate because, a lot of them stood on a soapbox and said, hey, we're going to roll back Obamacare. We're either going to replace it or we're going to gut this individual mandate. We're going to do something about Obamacare. But now that they're in, it's, I don't know if we can really do that. A lot of them came on strong saying, look, we need tough laws on immigration. We need to close the borders. We need to deport all these illegals. We need to get tough on the immigration thing. We need to do something about this, But now that they're in, it's, I don't know if we can really, are we really going to, close down Homeland Security to punish no, because we're scared of them. Arab terrorists, they're going to get us if we do that. So, now they're starting to make all kinds of excuses for backtracking. But they can make points by promising Americans jobs because, frankly, there's a lot of Americans right now who could really use jobs. But the Keystone pipeline, this is one of the few things I kind of agree with Obama on. This Keystone pipeline is a boondoggle. This is a pipeline that runs from Canada down to the Pacific coast of Mexico, which will allow Canadians to pump oil into Mexican territory where Chinese ships can pick it up and not have to pay longshoremen a fair fee for loading the cargo. Bottom line, it's a way to circumvent American labor, cut us out of our fair piece of the action. Now look, if the Canadians want to ship their oil to Europe, they want to ship their oil to the Chinese, that's between them and their customers. But what they want is they want a pipeline running through American territory so they can cut Americans out of any opportunity to make a fair profit for handling their piece of the transaction. It's a way to bypass American labor. It's, yeah, you'll get a few short-term jobs. They'll probably bring up a bunch of scab labor from Central America to do it. Maybe even some Chinese labor will come over cheap, to build this pipeline. How many Americans are going to get a job out of this Keystone pipeline? Chances are very few, and it'll be very short-lived. And in the long run, it's a bad deal. But certain Republican interests, particularly the Bush family, which is heavily invested in petroleum goods, certain American interests want that pipeline. And this is a way the Republicans can swear up and down they're going to get you a job, when in fact, in the long run, they're going to cut you out of one. But don't expect them to do a damn thing for you on Obamacare. Don't expect them to do a damn thing for you on immigration, regardless of all the campaign promises. It's like, one more burst of smoke blown up your skirt. President Barack Obama's determined efforts to combat global warming face their biggest trial yet as Republicans take full control over the Congress. The GOP vows to move fast and forcefully to roll back his environmental rules and force his hand on energy development. Bottom line is, there's a lot of oil money support for the Republican Party. The Bushes, the Carlyle Group, operated by the Bush family, very heavily invested in oil. They want to frack right in your backyard, and they want to pump every drop of oil that they possibly can and sell it for whatever price they can get. And you betcha, the GOP is going to go headlong at developing America's energy resources so we can be energy independent. And make the Bush family even more money than they've got already. Success for Republicans on the climate front would jeopardize a key component of Obama's legacy, and the ramifications would likely ricochet far beyond the United States. Like you're not breathing soot from the Chinese coal-fired power plants already. See, we should be good guys and, reduce our carbon footprint and all that, yet the Chinese and India can do pretty much whatever they want. This is a prescription for killing our industrial base here in the United States. I mean, it's already been shipped to China and India and other countries in the Far East. We're already crippled as far as our ability to produce goods that the world might wish to buy. It's just, another nail in the coffin. And are the Republicans really going to do anything about it? Republicans, Democrats, these guys are both playing for the same team, and it's not your team. I had one more article about the black kids invading restaurants where white people were eating up in New York. But, I'm hearing the music, so I got to bail out of here. I'm done barking at the moon for this week, but you betcha I'll be back next week with some more. Y'all have a good evening now. Good night. Well, I tell you, that was the last article that I had actually planned to present tonight. In a way, I'm kind of surprised I managed to get through that pile, because when I started, I looked at that pile and I said, man, I got a lot of articles to cover. I don't think I'm going to be able to get through all this stuff. But surely there were some items in the news that I I did not get to. Now I know, Maury, you sent me a couple of items, and I looked at those items, and I am aware of those. You sent me that one on the that one YouTube video about the chemtrails, and yeah, I'm familiar with that one. I'm not sure I totally buy into what was presented there, but that is one point of view, and it's as valid as many other. To be honest with you, when it comes to these chemtrails, unlike some people out there, I talk to Mike Rivero every once in a while, not very often. Don't get me wrong, we're not drinking buddies or anything. But he lives out in Hawaii, and the chemtrails that they do in Hawaii, they do so far to the west of him that he's never seen them. Okay, and Mike's just funny that way. If he don't see it, he don't believe it. Well, he's never been able to look upstairs. He's never been able to look up at the sky and see these things. I have. Okay, right here, just south of Washington D.C., I have seen them laying down checkerboards up there. So I know they're putting something up there. I have no idea what it is, and to be honest with you, I've heard a number of different explanations of it, and it could be that there are a number of different chemical cocktails that they're using for a variety of purposes. One thing I do know is that there is a lot of aluminum and barium salts in the concoction, and it's done a number on my ability to grow a garden. It's also discolored the roof on my house. The shingles on my house are discolored from the deposits from this crap that they're spraying up there. I know the stuff's not particularly good for me. I have no idea what the real purpose behind it. I've heard all the various theories on it, and to be honest with you, I'm not smart enough to pick and choose and decide which one is the real deal. As far as the other deal you were talking about, the banking bail-ins, yes, it is now legal in the United States, and I've covered this issue on a couple of my programs. The legislation has already passed that you are no longer a depositor in the bank. When you take money and you do what we used to call a deposit in the bank, and it even still says deposit slip on the deposit. Well, you are no longer a depositor in the bank. You are now an unsecured investor. You have given your money over to the bank with the expectation of receiving a modest return on your investment. And should the bank fail in its investments, you, as an investor, can and will share in that loss. It's very similar to the legislation that got the Cyprus thing done. This legislation has been passed here in the United States. It's also been passed in Canada. And just recently, a bill was put forward in the Congress to make the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, to make them responsible for losses in what's called derivatives. We know about the front exposure. We know about the exposure up front, but we have no idea how much exposure there is on what's called derivatives. Some say it might be as much as $2.5 quadrillion. Man, I thought a trillion was a lot of zeros. A quadrillion is 1,000 trillion. Man, that is a buttload of money. Now, the FDIC has a few hundreds of billions of dollars in their reserve. So, if one banking institution happens to, fold, and they have to make good. I think every depositor under FDIC is insured up to, $250,000. I don't know about you, but I don't have $250,000 in the bank. So in theory, if the FDIC kicks in and, my bank goes down, I would be fully reimbursed for everything that I had on deposit. Now that I'm no longer a deposit, but an unsecured investor, I'm not sure how that works. But the FDIC has now been charged with covering the banks for any losses incurred on derivatives. Now, a derivative is kind of like buying insurance, okay? If you're a bank and you invest in a company that does, say, fracking, and you're looking at it, you're saying, hey, this is a great technology, the bank's going to do well on this investment, everything's hunky-dunky-dory, but I should probably buy some insurance just in case my investment in this fracking company doesn't perform, because, as a prudent banker, I don't want to, I want somebody to share the risk with me. So I'd buy derivatives from, a derivatives broker to cover me in case this fracking company doesn't do well. Then, of course, oil drops from, $100 a barrel down below $50 a barrel. The fracking company goes bankrupt, and the bank loses a bunch of money. So this derivative, this insurance, kicks in and covers the bank for their losses from their investment in the fracking company. Well, the problem is, like any other insurance company, they use actuarial tables to decide what their risk is, and they don't have $2.5 quadrillion sitting in a vault somewhere to cover the entire derivative exposure. So now the insurance company is looking to buy some insurance, and guess who that insurance is coming from? You. Yeah. So not only has your protection as a depositor in the bank pretty much been written out of law. You're no longer a depositor. You're now an unsecured creditor. Okay, if the bank goes down, you are the last one to get paid. The first guy who gets paid is the guy who holds the derivatives contracts, and now you, in the form of the FDIC, are on the hook for the derivatives losses. Ain't it wonderful? Don't you just love it? Did my explanation on that make sense? It's kind of, I know it's terribly contorted the way these financial, it's no wonder they get away with some of this stuff, because, it's got so many flips and flops in it that, it's difficult to keep track of who's responsible for what. Well, yeah, the interesting thing is, the money doesn't really exist anyway, and if all these derivative contracts fail and everything goes, bonkers, what I can't figure out is, why didn't the Federal Reserve just run the printing presses an extra hour some night and pay it all off, Why do they want to hook me for it? The reason they want to hook you for it is control, okay? That's what it's all about. Keep you like a hamster running on the wheel, chasing a non-existent piece of cheese, okay? That's what we are. We're a bunch of hamsters running in a wheel, because off in the distance, we see this picture of a piece of cheese. And we think, boy, we just run on this wheel just a little bit harder, a little bit faster, we'll eventually get that piece of cheese. And they keep moving the cheese. Who moved my cheese? Yeah. All right, so what other hot items in the news did I miss? Oh, yeah, one of the Sandy Hook kids died again in Pakistan. Yeah, I read that article. Isn't that a shame? I mean, that poor kid. First he gets murdered at Sandy Hook, now he gets killed in a school in Pakistan. That kid's got no luck at all. Yeah, I know. I've yet to see any definitive proof that the Sandy Hook thing really even happened the way it was reported. I have no idea. But I've gotten so damn jaded over the years that if I see it reported on CNN, NBC, and CBS, I see that as entertainment. I might as well be watching an episode of 24 hours. Who's Jack going to torture this week? As far as Jeb Bush goes, it's almost getting like a dead horse. I've beat that horse and beat that horse and beat that horse. chances are it's going to be a Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton election. It depends on how well they can cover up this latest pedophilia thing where, apparently, Bill, good old Bill Clinton, yeah, I did not have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. It was my cigar did it. But, apparently, see, he's caught up in this pedophilia thing, this underage girls, and I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be enough to disqualify Hillary or not. She if it starts getting too hard, she'll go on TV and she'll cry and she'll say, "Oh, I'm the mistreated wife. I got snookered by him again. Yeah, okay." And a lot of people, she'll probably get a sympathy vote for that. So I'm not sure. I mean, frankly, Hillary Clinton has got enough baggage on her own, Benghazi. There are so many things that should disqualify cocaine dealers. There are so many things that should disqualify Rose Law Firm, that should disqualify that woman from running as president, all on her own, that, the foibles of her sex addict husband, shouldn't really have any impact. Anybody who even thinks about Hillary Clinton as president is probably on some sort of SSRI. But it's shaping up to be a dynastic presidential run where we are very likely to see Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton. So, you get to choose shit or manure. Which one stinks the least? Who's worse, Bush or Obama? Man, I'll tell you, that's a hard choice. Which Bush? I mean, we had Bush the Greater and Bush the Lesser, Bush the Crook and Bush the Idiot. I think Obama is probably worse than either of the Bushes, but man, I'll tell you, Obama has proven to be a worse president than Jimmy Carter, and that took some doing. Okay, Jimmy Carter, up until now, was without a doubt the worst president in American history. Obama now holds the title. That don't mean I particularly liked Bush. I mean, I was all over Bush like white on rice. I mean, I didn't care much for that SOB either. But Obama has brought a new level of stink to the presidency. Elizabeth Warren. No, thank you. Whitewater. Well, that was the Rose Law Firm thing. That was Whitewater. Yeah, but yeah, Hillary's got plenty of baggage. I mean, that woman is dirty, 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 nasty. Oh no. I'll tell you, in about the last 4 elections for president, I have written in Mickey Mouse. One of these days, enough people are going to get on board that they're actually going to have to announce to the American people that Mickey Mouse won the election for president. I'm going to run a write-in campaign for Mickey Mouse. I mean, I can't possibly vote for Jeb Bush, and I can't possibly vote for Hillary Clinton. I mean, that'd be worse than Obama. Either one of them. Good Lord. Yeah, Bozo the Clown, yeah. Is he still alive? I tell you what, you could pick up a drunk off the street, dust him off, stick him in the White House. Don't even give him a bath or change his clothes. And I suspect he could do as good a job as about the last 4 presidents we've had. Homer Simpson. Yeah, I could get behind a Homer Simpson campaign. You betcha. All right, guys. we're getting off on tangents here. Was there any really hard-hitting news items that I just blew right through and didn't cover tonight? Something I missed? Did you hear the one about, they've found a handful of more planets that look very Earth-like? It's looking more and more and more like planets in the Goldilocks zone where water can exist as a liquid are turning out to be quite common. So that means if we totally destroy this dirt ball, there's a chance that at least a few of us might be able to migrate somewhere else. Gas tax increases. Didn't I cover that? Maybe not. I think I talked about that a little bit in pre-show chat, but yeah, they are. Gas prices are down. They've been wanting to increase the gas tax for many, many years. But every time they talk about increasing the gas tax, everybody's, holy cow, gas is already closing in on $5 a gallon. You hit me with a bigger tax. Well, see, gas prices are down right now. Gas prices are much lower now than they've been in 10 years. Of course, I remember 27 cents a gallon, so even $2.50 looks kind of high to me. But if you're used to paying $3.50, $4.50, closing in on $5 a gallon for gasoline, you look at the gas prices right now, they look pretty reasonable. A little less than $2.50. I think around here I can get gas for as little as $2.25 at some of the off-brand places. Most of the brand name gas is like $2.35-ish, which I guess by today's standards seems pretty reasonable. Well, while they got you at a weak point, and you're thinking, oh man, gas is cheap. Oh boy, this is great. They're talking about raising the federal gas tax, and a lot of states would like to in on that too. So yeah, they're talking about raising the gas tax while the gas prices are low. The problem with this is just a temporary lull in gas prices. You best enjoy it while it lasts, because as soon as they're finished punishing Russia over this Ukraine thing, those gas prices are going to go through the roof, and $5 will look like cheap gas. Now, if they get you for the increase in gas taxes too, it's like hitting you with a double whammy. But they figure they got you at a weak point right now because you're all fat and happy because gas prices are low. So they figure they can sneak it in on you while you're not looking, and you betcha they will. Kind of like the internet taxes. They're coming on soon. Well, one of the things that the reduced price on oil is doing is it's making fracking uneconomical, which some would say was great. There's a lot of people out there say, no fracking, no way, no how. Now, I take a more centrist approach on it. The basic technology of fracking, if it was applied properly, is probably not so bad. The problem is they're so damned greedy that they're using this fracking technology in geological formations where it's dangerous. In particular, they're using it in areas where there can be infiltration of the fracking materials into groundwater. And that's showing up in places in Louisiana. It's showing up in places in Ohio. It's showing up in places in Pennsylvania. It's they're so damned greedy that they want to frack every rock formation in the country. If they were real careful how they applied this fracking technology, it could be a very useful and safe technology. But they're like kids with a new toy. They got a hammer. Everything out there looks like a nail to them, and they're stupid and they're greedy, and it's hurting a lot of people. But with gas prices down, oil prices low, it's too expensive to frack the oil out of the ground now. When oil was $100 a gallon or more, they could extract the oil and gas using fracking technology and make a profit. Now that it's down around 50, all of a sudden it's a loser. So yes, the reduced price of oil is hurting the U.S. oil industry right now. But, they figure it's a reasonable price to pay if they punish Russia. Russia is almost totally dependent on their oil exports for foreign trade. So, if they can hurt the Russians more than they hurt us, they figure, okay, this is a good deal. And don't kid yourself, Saudi Arabia does not go to the toilet without asking permission from Israel and the United States. So if Saudi Arabia has reduced their price on their oil products, I guarantee you they're doing it with the full permission and support of the United States government and Israel. They're basically complicit in trying to hurt Russia. The Saudi government jumps whenever Israel or the United States says boo. That's just how it is. Have they fracked near a nuclear plant yet? I'll tell you what, they were doing some fracking here in central Virginia about 3-4 years ago. Caused a little bit of an earthquake that apparently did some damage at the North Anna nuclear plant in central Virginia. So, they're so damned greedy that they're, what can I say? I don't know 100% for certain of any nuclear meltdowns caused by fracking. Don't know about that. Well, to be honest with you, Tommy Reed, after what happened in Fukushima, I would like to see them close all nuclear power plants. Convert them over to, okay, we're fracking the hell out of the United States. We're producing a tremendous amount of natural gas. Screw it, these nuclear power plants that we've got in play right now have proven to be more dangerous than they're worth. They have never produced a profit. All they have produced is an awful lot of nuclear waste that we still don't know what the hell to do with. We still have no way of getting rid of it. Close those damn nuke plants down, convert them over to be powered by natural gas. It's just too damned risky. Now, there are better ways to do nuclear power. Unfortunately, these lithium salt reactors, what do they call them, LFTRs, they don't produce weapons grade material, so the military can't really get behind that. But they could produce electricity for consumer use, and even though there is nothing safe about a thorium reactor, they're a hell of a lot safer than what we've got right now. And the chances of a Fukushima-style meltdown with a thorium-style reactor is like zero. So, is a thorium reactor safe? No, don't kid yourself. They're not safe. Hell, you don't want to be anywhere near a diesel storage facility smoking one of these things. Things can happen. And a thorium plant is certainly not safe, but when it's scale. The nuclear plants we've got right now, these light water reactors, pressurized water reactors that we're using right now, stupid. That is the stupidest way in the world. I cannot think of a stupider way to boil water. I see it differently. I don't think Fukushima is actually going to end us. What Fukushima will do is it will reduce your life expectancy. Okay, I mean, for the longest time, the life expectancy of Western populations was increasing slowly. But there was a time when average life expectancy here in the United States was 40 years old, 45 years old. I mean, if you were 45 years old, you were an old dude. Now there were always the Benjamin Franklins who lived to be a ripe old 80-something. But by and large, average people who had to do average kind of works and took average risks during their lifetime. And of course, the infant mortality was much higher back in those days too. But average lifespans were 40, 45 years old, and people thought that was a ripe old age. Well, over the years, that life expectancy has increased to the point where right now, if you're in your 50s or 60s right now, you can pretty much expect that you'll probably live into your late 70s, mid 80s, maybe if you're lucky. Maybe even a little bit longer if you give up nasty vices like this and live a healthy life. What exposure to low-level radiation will do is start to decrease that life expectancy. So we'll find that while my generation might live an average of 82 years, the generation following me might only live an average of 78 years, and the generation following them might only live an average of 71 years. So, the average life expectancy will start to drop as people suffer the effects of long-term exposure to low levels of radiation. That's the impact that we can expect. I mean, is everybody, going to turn into a Walking Dead style zombie next week because of Fukushima? No. Is all your hair going to fall out and your eyes going to bleed next week because of Fukushima? No. But you're liable to die probably of a heart attack. That's the most common thing that low levels of radiation, it causes heart failure, causes degenerative disease of the organs, so organ failure, heart failure at a much earlier age than might otherwise be expected. That's what we can anticipate from long-term exposure to low levels of radiation. That's correct. Fukushima has not yet hit its stride, and Fukushima will continue for at least hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. We don't know. There's some indication that chunks of the corium, that is the remains of the melted down nuclear core from Fukushima, at least 2 of the reactors melted all the way through the containment vessel into the ground. Okay, they're doing a China syndrome number. There's some indication that microscopic particles off of the corium have somehow made it into the Pacific Ocean. They're finding radioactive amalgams that they cannot explain. And it's not headed for the bottom of the ocean like everybody thought. Everybody thought, okay, there's a big trench off the coast of Japan. Everybody thought, oh, well, worst case scenario, this stuff slides off into the trench and it'll be down there, 15,000 feet under the water. Okay. Problem solved, right? Well, no, it's not sinking to the bottom of the ocean like everybody thought. This stuff is actually remaining in suspension at the surface of the Pacific Ocean. And these are, in theory, fairly heavy radioactive isotopes, stuff with plutonium and uranium content in it. But they're fused with other materials that apparently allow them to be buoyant. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And I'm not sure that anybody with the right technology is even looking at it closely. The EPA packed up all their radiation monitoring gear out of the West Coast, moved it. They ain't telling us nothing. Our EPA that'll come down on us over a carbon tax, our EPA that'll get after a farmer for driving his pickup truck down a dusty road, doesn't seem the least bit interested in monitoring the environment for radiation from Fukushima. See how much your government loves you, how much they want to take care of you? Nobody knows the trouble I seen. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good old song. All right, guys. I about had it. I'm tired. I'm going to go ahead and bag it for the evening. Thank you all for spending your Tuesday evening listening to me bark at the moon as if anybody was really listening. And hope to see you again next week. Take care, all. Good night.
Ooh, the love of the turnarounds. None of us are leaving here alive. Whoa, what will you say? What will you say? And what will you do? What will you do? What will you do? Oh, I'm calling out to you. Won't you turn around? Oh, I'm calling out to you. Won't you turn